master's. He was completing his master's in counseling. And after I had cussed and been angry at everybody, including myself, for miscalculating the two electives, he said, take the two electives, take two master's level courses, because they're introductory counseling courses. They will likely transfer when you go to UTA. So my senior year, my last semester here, spring of '74, I took two electives. I took defensive driving and typing. And I took counseling 510 or something, but I took two introductory counseling courses. I thoroughly enjoyed them, and I thought, well, I'm here. I might as well stay. And I was one that went to school year-round, so I stayed during the summer, took 4 of the courses, and then when the fall started, I had 6 graduate courses out of the way, so I had done the GRE, admission to candidacy, and that's where I stayed. One of the reasons that I knew I needed to get a master's degree is that because I went to school year-round, and because I'm from Dallas, a lot of my old teachers came to summer school. And I'd see them all the time, and they'd take me out, they'd take me to lunch, and we'd sit in the old Lions lair, and each one of them, I would ask, why are you coming back every summer? And they indicated, in order for me to advance, whether it's administration or to advance in my area, I have to get a master's degree. And so each one of them said, if I were you, I would stay and get it done now, because once you graduate and you get a job, you get married, you have children, it is too difficult to come back. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And so because my teachers, you could convince me. I was raised in a household, and I think I told you about that, in that I believed what my grandparents told me was the truth. And so I associated that with adults who had more wisdom than me. If you gave me some information, then I believed you were telling me the truth, and I would try to heed it. And that's what happened. I just ended up staying here because I had been told by my old teachers, get it done now while you're young. And so I ended up just staying and getting a master's degree.
Any of the professors in the counseling department who had a particular effect on your...
My advisor, who became my friend, was Dr. Bob Gold. Like most of the people in the counseling department, he was a character. Really brought home to me still the realities of the world. I remember on one occasion, 2 stories I want to tell you about, and they're quick. On one occasion, I was about to graduate, and he asked me, what are you going to do when you graduate? I said, well, and he stopped me. He said, let me tell you what you think you're going to do. You think you're going to graduate, you're going to go to Dallas, and everybody's going to want to hire you. It's not going to happen. And so I'm like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't get it. He said, let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to end up going to a small town, getting some experience, and then you'll get back to Dallas. And I'm like, no. And he said, let me tell you why. And because he knew me, some of it's true, some of it's not. He said, number one, you're young. He said, you're 23 years old. I just turned 23. He said, you're young, you're single, you're African American, and you're borderline arrogant. And I never forgot that. And guess what happened? I interviewed, I sent resumes out. Fortunately, when I was going in grad school, I was smart enough, and situations just became available, that I started working at Derryle State Hospital. I worked full-time. I worked as I did a practicum in undergraduate social work class at Derryle State Hospital, so I was familiar with it. I knew that I was going to graduate with a master's degree and no work experience, and so I started working at Derryle the March of that year, and I worked through October. But we drove back and forth to Derryle. I worked full-time on the substance abuse ward. Perfect place for me. Psych major, counseling. Dr. Gold had indicated that you need to have some experience, and the experience you have working at Derryle is not going to be good enough. And he's right. I put out resumes, went on interviews, interview after interview, where I know that I was more than qualified to do the job, and I didn't get the jobs. But fortunately for me, I finished my degree, I finished the coursework midsummer, but I didn't graduate till August, so I still had another 6 weeks before I was to graduate. And I was here, and I was just working back and going, driving back and forth between here and Derryle or going home into Dallas. I interviewed and interviewed and interviewed, didn't get a job. Then friends of mine who were also fraternity members who had moved to Corsicana. One was Marvin Sedberry, who was the athletic director in Greenville, who's now athletic director down in Leaf, Texas. Marvin Sedberry, another guy named Irvin Yarborough, who was from Corsicana, and my friend Kenneth Martin. He started working in Derryle, and they called and said, look, there's a position here at the Corsicana State Home, Texas Youth Commission. He said, they needed, it was a vocational counselor job. This is interesting. Put in my resume, went down for an interview, and when I finished interviewing, it was a grant position. And they said, look, position's not going to open up for a while, but we see you have casework, you have a social work, essentially a social work degree as well. We have a position open in our casework department. Let me call the director, I'm sure he wants to interview you. So I went, interviewed for a job that I didn't go down the interview for, and ended up getting the job.
Okay.
And so I moved to Corsicana.
And worked as a social worker there. Did you have an inclination coming into college to that's a hard job. That's a grueling emotional job. And I don't know what the funding was like in the 70s, but I imagine it wasn't incredibly better than it is now. Yeah. So you've got tons of cases to work, even in a town the size of Corsicana. Did you want to go? Was this the route you had planned coming in?
Interesting. All the entrance inventories that I took, or even in junior high, fortunately, I worked in the counselor's department in junior high, and I would take these personality and interest inventories, and I knew that based upon all of that, that I would end up in the helping profession, but I didn't know what it was going to be. I never wanted to work with children. I always envisioned myself working with adults. It was the right place for me to end up. Texas Youth Commission, I had a caseload of students. These kids were taken from their homes by the courts. They were declared dependent and neglected, or this category that they had called children in need of supervision. They were pre-adolescent, what's the word? They were pre-adjudicated, so they weren't yet adjudicated as juvenile delinquents. And so they lived in the facility. We had the Texas Youth Commission either had what they call managing conservatorship or possessory conservatorship of the children, and they were taken from their families. And I had a caseload of students that I worked with, they were ages 13 through 15, boys and girls. They went to school in the community. They just lived there. It was Texas Youth Commission's, Texas Youth Commission had children homes as well. They were more infamously known for their state schools, which Gatesville State School, Gatesville, which is now Women's Prison, was a state school. Gatesville, Brownwood, Gainesville, Crockett, and so they had state schools all over the state.
Okay. So so the kind of work you were doing there had officially, as much as unofficially, I imagine, a rehabilitation then. I mean, they assume that we haven't lost these kids, or some of them have been pulled out of their homes, so they weren't even in trouble, except that their lives were terrible.
Yeah. And I was a perfect